Welcome everyone. The hour being 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. The Tooele City Council and the Redevelopment Agency of Tooele City are meeting in a work meeting being held at Tooele City Hall in the council chambers located at 90 North Main Street. This is also being broadcast on the Tooele City YouTube channel. We will start with a roll call. Councilwoman Manzio.
Present.
Councilman Graff.
Present.
He's joining us by phone. Councilman Hanson.
Present.
Councilman McCall.
Present.
I'm Councilman Brady. I'm also present. We'll move on to item 3, which is the mayor's report.
Thank you so much, Chairman and Council. Excited to report some things to you tonight of great things that are happening in our city. The first item that I want to talk about is our snow event that happened last Wednesday. So we have understood, at least from the reports, that we have not received this much snow in a 24-hour period for 30 years. So this was a significant snow event. We have asked our residents to pray for snow, and it works. We're getting a significant amount of moisture, which is wonderful, and we appreciate it. I just want to give you a little bit of an update of what happened on that day. We had many of our employees worked that day. We did close City Hall because we knew that we had a problem getting employees to work, and we figured that we wouldn't have very many people coming in that day with the snow event because it did snow all day. But we had, in our Public Works Department only, we had 10 streets employees working, 5 water reclamation plant still has to run. We had 6 water department employees that, of course, did plowing, recovering vehicles. They were making sure that the salt sheds stayed loaded, and then eventually they were backup drivers for plowing the snow. Our Public Works Shops Department, 2 employees were there all day working on repairing anything that needed to be repaired to get back out on the road. And then the Public Works office, we had 5 people in the office working, and really 2 of them were here at City Hall. They made it through the snow. This picture here we're showing you, this is just where we park some of our city vehicles, and you can see there was no way they were going to get out of there that day. But we did try to encourage any of our employees that could work from home to do that. That was basically our office staff. And one very important person who needed a laptop happened to be Shiloh. And Jamie was out that day, our Public Works Director, Jamie Grand Prix. And this is Jamie. He had brought the laptops to Shiloh. He is standing in Shiloh's driveway. Look how high the snow is up there. So we appreciated him getting that to her, and then we were able to communicate, Shiloh and I working from home. The snowplow employees, the streets, started on Tuesday evening at 5 p.m., and they did not quit driving until Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. That was an 18-hour shift. The backup snowplow drivers, which is the streets or the water department, came in, and some of the wastewater and also the shops division helped us plow. They worked for a 7-hour shift, and they went from the 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. 6 p.m. that evening, streets crew came back, and they worked until 3:15 p.m. the next day. That is a 19-hour shift. And that was Thursday. Then Friday, of course, they resumed their regular hours, worked from 6:45 to 3:15, just really trying to clear more snow drifts and continuing to clean up all the secondary streets in the city. We had a lot of residents that were stuck in the snow that our crews helped to get unstuck. And we even had one of our streets on-call employees that was busy over the weekend continuing to clear snow drifts because we had wind over the weekend, and it seemed to move the snow, and the wind put it right back. Of course, our emergency crews are always wonderful. That would be our police and our fire department. And, of course, police department, which was very interesting as we get the report the next day, and I look, we still have as many police calls as we do on a regular day. So those people that need help and crimes are still being committed, those things are still happening in a city when we have a snowstorm like this. Our fire department was out, of course, responding to calls, but also they responded to a call from a resident who lives in a mobile home and her roof was coming in. Fire department responded. It took them a couple of hours to finally convince her that she really did need to leave. She was scared, but it was difficult to leave. She had 4 animals, 4 dogs that she did not want to leave, and our animal shelter was full, and our animal our animal shelter supervisor even said, I will take them into my home if I need to take the dogs to help her to feel more comfortable. So we had a great group of people working to make sure she was safe. Our fire department was also on call that day. If they needed to respond to an emergency, an ambulance needed to respond and they could not get down a street, then the fire department was on call to take the needed medical people to the homes. Also, our water department was busy that day also. We had 2 large water leaks that were reported near the rodeo grounds and over on Coleman, and so of course streets crews out working. How they get under the snow and to what they need is just commendable to them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and have you flip through a couple of these next slides. Right there in the middle of the photo is a car that is buried by the snow. We continue to have residents park on the street during a snowstorm, and as you can see, first of all, if it's a car that's like this and covered, or it is a flatbed trailer that is totally covered, if one of our snow plows hit that vehicle, we're in for major trouble and injuries. And so I'll let you flip through these next few. Here we are, I mean, even still the day after, we've still got cars parked on the road. Of course, you've got snow in front of them or on the other side, so they've got to dig out that. It is a safety issue. We had several complaints. This truck here even happens to be parked on the wrong side of the road, facing the wrong direction, buried in snow. I think we've got a couple others. Here's one still parked on the road. And last, even an old school bus parked on the road that during a snowstorm, and it is illegal, and I have directed our police department to issue citations for any of those. There was quite a lengthy list, and I understand that citations were issued. We did receive several phone calls from residents, and many were saying thank you, but the others were saying there's cars on my road and you can't plow my road because I've got people parked on the road. So we're working hard to get that message out to our residents. Get your vehicles off the road during a snowstorm. It is a big safety issue. Okay. Next picture. Here's our streets crew. This is a picture of them early Friday morning. We got them together to take a picture for a special event. And we'll go to the next picture. Is our Public Works Streets lead, Mark Hervat, retired as an employee of Tooele City with 30 years. And his retirement luncheon was scheduled for Thursday, but with the snowstorm, it had to be postponed one more day. So we held it on Friday, and that's where we had all the streets crew together. And with the forecasted snow and the long shifts worked, the retirement luncheon again was postponed till Friday. But Mark worked every minute of that massive storm, and he did not take time off, and he did not complain. And when you're that close to retirement, you would probably want to just say, I'm not coming in today, but he was here, and he made the comment at the luncheon that what a way to end my career. So we're very appreciative of Mark and all the streets department and every other employee at the city that worked that day, because most of us were still working. Just to let you know, there is more snow to come. Today we received this from the National Weather Service through our emergency management at the county, which Bucky Whitehouse sent this today. We are appreciative of him keeping us updated. But this is a projection for the month of March, and as you can see, Tooele City is in the above precipitation outlook, which means we're going to get more snow. We're going to get more rain, maybe, if it warms up a little bit. But the next slide is going to show you that we're also in the area that we believe that we will have a lower, we will be below on temperature. So it's on the next, there it is, you got it right there, that we still are going to be cooler. So we're hopeful that we will be cooler because we don't want that snow coming down very fast and have it already be causing flooding. But I want to let the residents know we are planning for floods. We would be silly not to be prepared and plan for floods. So I'm asking residents right now that we want you to prepare if you have sections of your yard or if your water comes in window wells when we have these big events, please come and get sandbags. We do have a slide here right now. We have sandbags that will be available at the salt shed. That is the state and the city and county. We all use that. But we will have, we are planning on at least one other location in the city to get sandbags. And we're working with the county to make that happen. So we have plenty of sandbags for people. And we'll get that information out on our social media, our website, and again in the newsletter. We just want you to be prepared. We had two great events that happened this last week. Friday night was the 11th annual Mr. and Miss Super Amazing pageant that is put on by the special ed teachers, and especially to Rebecca Ford, who is the teacher. She does such a wonderful job with this pageant, and it was very, very emotional. As you can see in the middle there, the king and the queen were crowned. Connor McGinnis is the king, and Lexi Earl was crowned the queen, and she's there in the picture there with our Miss Twill City royalty who helped. But there were also some special things that happened that night. Eric Dowdle was in town Friday night to set up for our event on Saturday. And after he spent a couple of hours setting up puzzles, he came down to the pageant, wanted to see what it was all about. And it was very heartwarming to know that he was there. And then also the governor's wife, the first lady, was set to help judge the pageant, and she was ill that day, and so the governor came out here and took her place and judged the pageant along with myself and Miss Utah Lindsay Larson. So what a great heartwarming event. It's like I say, it's an annual event, and when you look at their program of all the sponsors in town, it just brings our community together, so we're very, very grateful. The last event that I'd like to talk about is our 170th birthday party that we had last Saturday. We did have over 400 chairs set up, but there was really standing room only by the time it was over. We guess about 600 people. We did make the front page of the newspaper. We just got this today. We're really excited about it, and we just want to remind the residents that the puzzles are for sale here at City Hall. They're $24.99 plus tax, so it's $26 something when we add the tax to that. And just to give you an update, earlier today, because I know we've sold more now because I just stood down there and watched some more go out the door, but we have sold over 860 puzzles so far. And really, they will make a treasured gift for any current or former member resident here of Tooele City. So we are proud of where we live. The original artwork is hanging in the hallway here at City Hall. We encourage people to come and check that out. And then later this summer, we expect to do another special, won't be an unveiling because we've already seen what the puzzle looks like, but there will be a large 8 by 10 foot copy of what this tribute to our city, the artwork will be placed at our Veterans Park so that people can come and enjoy the artwork and really learn about the history of our awesome city. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Nguyen. We'll move on to item 4, which is the council members' report. We'll start with Councilman McCall.
Other than attend the event this weekend, I didn't really do anything. COG was the week before. Yep, okay. That's about it.
Thank you. Councilman Hanson.
Only thing I got is kudos, Mayor, and whoever helped you with your party. It was great. Yeah, good time. You guys did really well, and it was great event, I thought, so. And then with the snow and with everything else going on in life, I was to nothing else, so. Yeah.
We have an amazing staff who worked tirelessly to pull off that event.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Appreciate
Yeah,
them
so,
all so
yeah.
much.
Councilman Graff?
Thank you. I really enjoyed the event last Saturday. I thought it was just a tremendous community event. It was so good to see everyone. I also want to commend our street and all our snowplow drivers and all the support staff that helped get the snowplows out. Thank you so much. That was a once in a lifetime of snow, hopefully, right? And I'm just grateful for all of our employees.
Councilwoman Manzione.
Thanks. I would echo that about the puzzle party. It was really fun, and I was glad to see so many people there. As part of the RDA, we are getting ready to launch and we're going to actually hopefully approve something tonight, our Tooele Business Park. And so we've been meeting with a couple of different interested parties as far as purchasing land from the RDA, which is really great news, actually. And there are some really good companies that are interested in the property. But I wanted to just say one thing. One of the groups that we met with came just in time for the big snowstorm. And so it was kind of bad timing to meet with them because we had to delay that and they weren't able to go to all the places that they wanted to, but we still got them around the next day. But one of the comments they made, I just wanted to share, and they talked about how they came from a state, they were coming here from a state that doesn't have snow. If they had gotten a half an inch of snow, they would have shut down the whole city. And so they decided to just sit back and look out the window and kind of watch and see what happened with a big snow event like this. And they were continued to go on. They're like, we looked out and there were snow plows and there were people shoveling and there were people walking and driving, and your infrastructure was set up just awesome, and we saw people out there working, and it was, the very next day we were able to meet with them, and we were able to drive around, and they were able to go out to lunch. They walked over to a restaurant to eat during the snowstorm. So they were just really impressed with our setup and how quickly we responded and how well things were taken care of. And I think that is just kudos to our staff and the people who were out there working. I mean, I spent a lot of time shoveling my own driveway, so I can't imagine the amount of hours in a snowplow. So I appreciate that, and I thought it's nice to hear that from somebody who's not from here.
Thank you. I attended the pageant, and then the puzzle unveiling was awesome. So I've heard really good things from the public that they think it's great, and it's a great way to market our city. And then today I attended the Council on Aging for the county. Things are going well with that. I know that Amy mentioned she has a meeting with Mayor Nguyen next week, I think. So a few things that we'll be talking about budget-wise with that. That concludes my report. So we'll move on to item 5, which is our discussion items. The first one is ordinance 2023-08. An ordinance of Tooele City amending Tooele City Code Chapter 5-20 regarding alcohol licensing, presented by Roger Baker, the city attorney.
A lot of papers to just say throw it out the window.
There's a big old book there, so.
Brought my library with me this evening. Tonight, we're going to tag team, and I invite Jim and Chief Day to contribute anything they would like at any time, whether they're correcting me or not. So this has been a collaborative effort with them and with the mayor to take a hard look at how we regulate alcohol sales in Tooele City. The regulation of alcohol sales is not a new idea. I mean, it goes back to the very first settlements in the state of Utah. Alcohol has always been regulated on many levels, from the local government to the state government to the federal government, in different ways at different times. Our alcohol regulations, I don't know when they began. I'm confident they began about 1853 or so. The oldest city, we do have some 1905 city code books, at the library. But the oldest one that I have in my office is the 1967 City Code. And it has an entire chapter on the regulation of alcohol sales, and it's in the same place in the City Code then as it is today. So why are we even discussing this with you if it's something so long-standing? Well, we've had some challenges in the area of licensing businesses that sell alcohol in Tooele. And those challenges have involved this question: how intensively do we want to regulate alcohol sales in Tooele when the state of Utah, at this point in time, regulates alcohol sales very intensely and scrutinizes every business engaged in alcohol sales closely, and licenses all of these establishments itself, and does extensive background checks itself? And if that is the regulatory climate today, then does the city need to put its resources into a parallel, redundant licensing scheme? Part of this licensing question has been, what is the role of the police department in issuing business licenses? Historically, the state of Utah has a concept called local consent. Those words are not in our code anywhere and haven't been for a long time. But historically, in state regulation of alcohol sales, the state has wanted the cities to give their local consent to these establishments going in under whatever criteria the cities had. One of the most common ones is what we call proximity. Is the establishment within a certain number of feet of community locations where the public would be coming, and where we do not want we do not want children, for example, interacting with the sales of alcohol. So our code in 1967 says that every business license application for alcohol sales will be referred to the police department, and the police department will investigate it and come back to the city administration and council and recommend approval or denial of the license based on criteria that are not in the code. That language, I've given it to you. I think it would be worth looking at for a few minutes. So in your packet, let's see if I can find a page number for you. Okay, it is page 32 of your packet. And I'd like to read some of this so that you can get an idea of the topic we're discussing, but also the way laws were written not that long ago. The application for such license, together with such information and certificate as is required by the council to be attached thereto, shall be referred to the police chief for inspection and report. Thus said police chief shall, within 5 days after receiving such application, make a report to the council relative to the granting of such license, and he shall add thereto his recommendation as to the granting or denying of said application. Upon receipt of the said report, the council shall act upon the application as it shall deem fair, just, and proper in regard to granting or denying the same. I don't write like that when I write legislation for you. I understand why it was done. It's very precise, and if you can follow it carefully, it makes sense, but I prefer simpler, more common language.
That way I'd be able to understand it if you did that.
So that concept was in our city code until almost word for word, without some of the flowery legalese, until about 2019, I believe, when we had some amendments and we revised the police department's involvement. But the question has remained, what is the police department's involvement in approving business licenses for alcohol sales? It's been a matter of confusion for them, for me, for the mayor and her departments. And so we dug into it, and my conclusion was that the police department's role is no longer an approving role under our current regulation. It is just to take a look at the applicant and to see if there are any disqualifying factors. And our code lists out the disqualifying factors, such as felony convictions, misdemeanor convictions of moral turpitude, perjury convictions for lying in official documents, those types of things, because prior councils decided as a matter of legislative policy that people that do those things should not have a license to sell alcohol in our city. I'm not commenting on whether that was a good or bad policy. It just was the policy. And so the police department's role today is to find out if the applicant should be disqualified. And the department would give that to Jim's department and business licensing, and then Jim and his staff would look at the code to see if, in fact, they should be disqualified and deny the license. State regulation of alcohol sales has ballooned. So the entire statutory code for the state of Utah fits into 4 books like this, 4 volumes. And they're divided into titles and then subdivided into chapters and parts and sections. Alcohol is regulated in the state of Utah by Title 32B in Volume 2. And the state's regulation occupies nearly a half inch of this volume. It's 137 pages of very small type. Ours is about 4 in our city code. The state regulates alcohol sales in minute detail, which raises the question, if the state does that, should we be putting our local resources into a redundant effort, into a duplicative effort? All the criminal background checks that our code would have the police department do to see if they should be disqualified are being done by the state and their investigators. Proximity is being evaluated by the state. Basically, almost everything that our city code mentions about regulating alcohol sales is already regulated in greater detail by the state of Utah. And so our proposal to you in general is that we bow to the state and let them do it. Let them put state resources into that, and we'll channel our local resources more efficiently to areas where we need more control. Instead of distracting police officers with these kinds of duties, we can let them do other core police duties that the chief assigns them to do. Similarly with Jim's department, instead of having them spend hours reviewing applications and backgrounds, and instead just give them the copy of the state license, and then we issue our business license like we do to every business, and off we go. Any questions at this point?
I was just wondering if there's any, in the state code, does it put any responsibility back on us to do something?
It does
Or
not.
It does not?
It gives us an opportunity to inform the state of our community locations like parks and museums and schools and how far they are from the applicant's premises. But the state even defines how to measure that 600 feet. Two different kinds of measurements. One is the crow flies, another is the drinker walks. So
Really, no, just, yeah. And so they enforce that too then?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they can't get a state license, liquor license or alcohol license if they violate those proximity regulations. Anything that you would like to add at this point, please? Well, okay. Well, I'll make them say something later, but. Now, there are a couple of, if you agree with us on that principle, then we would move forward and bring to you this ordinance, which would repeal most of the provisions in our current code and let the state do that job that they're already doing. There are some other provisions that raise policy issues that we need your guidance on. The main one is, right now in section 21, we have what's called a Class C tavern license restriction. And that says that you're limited to the number of alcohol establishments on any given city block. And again, that's a discretionary policy. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. If there's a right or wrong, I don't know. But prior councils have decided as a matter of policy that not every business on a block can be a bar or a tavern. They want to mix it up a little bit. Now, I'd like to read you a little bit about from our current city code. So it says that there shall be no more than 2 establishments licensed with a tavern license on any lineal block. Well, I was not familiar with the word lineal. I'm familiar with the word linear with an R, not with an L. And so I hopped on the internet and tried to figure it out, and it wasn't easy. But lineal can be read as the outside measurements of the thing that you're measuring. So a lumber is a number of linear feet, but it's also a number of lineal feet, and they're different. Lineal would be measuring around the perimeter of the lumber, whereas linear is just the length. So our code does not talk about a linear block. It talks about a lineal block. Now, I'd like to read the definition to you. Please be patient with me. And after I'm done, please tell me what it means. A lineal block is defined to mean both sides of the street between the beginning and ending of any series of street numbers measured east, west, north, or south, according to the present street numbering system of Tooele City, having a common number preceding the last 2 digits contained therein, or, in the case the street numbers do not contain 3 or more digits, the whole of such series of street numbers as, for example, from 0 to 99 west, or from 200 to 299 south, and excluding all side streets which intersect any other major street at a point beginning and end of a lineal block as measured on said major street. No such designated establishment shall be allowed on the side streets which are excluded from being lineal blocks in the preceding sentence. A corner establishment shall be included in the particular lineal block indicated by its street address. The Provisions of this section shall in no way affect the rights of present licensees to conduct their operations, so long as the licenses remain in good standing, yada, yada, yada. I am happy to say I didn't write that, but any idea what that means? I get into it and I'm thinking, maybe I get it, and then it takes me in a different direction, and I'm just all confused. So I enlisted an expert to illustrate to you both ways it could be read. Now, the policy question for you is, how do you want it to read? Mr. Expert?
Not like that.
Although I agree with Roger's presentation, I would not agree with the word expert. But one of the things that Roger didn't go into a lot of depth with is he and I both spent some time on the internet together and apart trying to figure out what lineal means. And in fact, we found definitions that showed them to mean something different, and then specific calls out that said they're synonyms, which means they're the same, but they're not. So which is which? The best we could find is, as Roger described, the differences between the two. So what would that mean to our code as far as determining how many tavern licenses could be put into a single block? I think it's interesting to note that although that 137 pages of very small type, and I'll agree with him, it is very small type in the state code, addresses the alcohol licensure, that has to be one of the most fluid sections of the state code. Every February and March, it changes, and so it's something that trying to keep up with is a challenge in itself, aside from understanding what the definition of lineal means. But the reason I bring that up is because we're talking about a Class C tavern license. I think it would be common nomenclature to think of that as a bar. But as our alcohol licensure in the state of Utah has evolved, it doesn't just mean a bar anymore. I'll give you two examples here in town, and they're not the only ones. Bonneville Brewery and Applebee's both have a tavern aspect to them, in addition to being a restaurant. We have, for instance, a sports bar who's looking to come into town. It is not a bar. It is very similar, a restaurant where you could take your family, have dinner, not including alcohol, or go there to watch a game and have an alcoholic beverage. So even the definition of what a tavern is changing, and what that license covers. Holly, can we switch to the click share real quick? So Roger and I put together a couple of demonstrations of what the difference between lineal and linear would mean for any one block in town, according to what our existing code says of 2 per block. So first is lineal, as our ordinance currently reads. And I've colored the blocks just so that you can see the difference between one block's definition versus another. So every block that's red is a lineal block versus a blue lineal block. So each one of these 9 colored blocks would be allowed 2 tavern licenses per block. So you can see the different configurations. I've tried to mix them up a little bit and spread them around the block so you could see how it would potentially work under a lineal definition. Now, when we talk linear, now we're talking about effectively a segment of the street. So a block of a street, both sides of the street. So using the same idea of the relationship in colors, this is what it would look like if you go to linear. Potentially much more. But again, keep in mind the difference between the idea of a bar tavern and a restaurant tavern. There may be areas where we want this definition. There may be areas where we want the other definition. The key is going to be, as Roger has worked diligently to do, is coming up with a better definition than what's in our current ordinance to determine that. And then also to very specifically call out which we're referring to. These two diagrams that I've just showed you are intended simply as a representation of maximum possibility with the 2 per block in our ordinance, simply so you can see the difference. Whichever direction we choose to go, and by we I mean the council as a city, to use lineal or linear, you may have noticed in the red lines that Roger prepared, it references a diagram. Something very similar to this, but smaller, will become that diagram once we know which direction the council is interested in going. There could be blocks where we want a lot of Applebee's and Bonneville breweries and whatnot in close proximity to each other. There may be others that we do not. And so that's why this becomes a very important discussion and policy consideration for yourselves, and we're happy to answer any questions. Did I hit that well enough, Roger?
Yeah. I'd like
Please.
to leave this up for a second. And, you know, at first when I saw this diagram, and I have to say I like Jim's first draft better that showed foaming mugs instead of boring teas. But we'll go with the teas. Tea for tavern. So when I first saw this diagram, I thought, wow, that's a lot. Do we really, does the council really going to want this many tavern licenses on a block? But then someone else raised the point, well, you have to have this in Park City to have the number of restaurants with bars in them. And we're not Park City. We may not want to be Park City. But we may want to have those kinds of blocks where we have lots of eating options and drinking options with other things mixed in. In fact, we would hope that our downtown might become that. And so I swung the other way thinking, well, maybe this is exactly what we might want. And that's the policy decision you get to make.
So can't we use words that are simpler instead of lineal and linear?
I would hope that once we have some direction from the council, we'll come up with a better way to define
Okay,
it, yes.
That was my first thought, is let's change the word.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, square block or something, I don't know.
Well,
Can it be by zone too? Like maybe the type of zoning something is?
Possibly.
Right.
Because I could see in a commercial zone, you would possibly want something like this. You want a lot of restaurant, you know, you have an area with a lot of restaurants or something, I could see that, but.
One of the interesting considerations with dealing with it by zone is depth. Many of those zones go, let's say, for
Further
instance,
than-
general commercial down Main Street. It doesn't just address the Main Street frontage. It will typically go a block, half a block to a block deep. Are you going to want them on the other side as well? Maybe we do.
Does the state have any regulation on the amount in a specific area?
Not that I'm aware of. I think this is purely a city regulation. I have taken a crack at a new definition, and a linear block would simply be both sides of the street on any block between intersecting streets. I mean, how hard does it have to be? But that may or may not work. We have to test it on each other and see if it works.
And does like Bonneville Brewery or places like that, does that count as one of them, even though it's a different type of tavern?
I believe it would, yeah.
Okay. See, and that's where I get concerned, especially as we have development into some of these, like the Kimball property. I think you would want restaurants that are able to serve what they want to serve.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the specific examples we used as we as staff were debating the difference between the two is projects like that. We may want a density there of these types of licenses. We may want, there's other areas of town as we develop. And using the Kimball property as an example, there's fairly large areas around it that are yet to develop. So there may be even more.
Same thing.
And it may be the same thing. We may not want to restrict it as tightly as going to a lineal, like you're seeing on the screen here, and reduce our possibility of having those types of businesses that would do well for the community, not just in the alcohol sales, but in the food sales as well. There may be, like I said earlier, there may be areas where we want this type of representation, other areas we want this type of representation.
It seems like there's two different kinds of things too, so do you specify that? Because when I grew up as a young kid in the 60s and stuff, I still grew up on Vine Street. Well, we had several bars, real bars there in my eyes, where they served alcohol and played pool and twisted the little things and pulled it out to win money and all that stuff, because I'd show up there to get change or whatever. But so we had several of them in proximity there, same with on Broadway. You had more than two per block.
Yeah,
Okay, but then you have, nowadays, we have sports bars and
Sure.
places that I frequent all the time. I don't drink, but I'm still there, and there's set there all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're probably all patrons of Bonneville
And they're different.
Brewery,
Now, we don't have
you
as
know?
many old bars like we used to in town, but we still have some.
Yeah, and we even talked about the one block there of Broadway just north of the Railroad Museum. There's 3 there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only 2 of them face Broadway, though. So which definition do we use?
There you go.
So and we have one right here across the street in Vine, just at 50 East.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some policy considerations and some very uniqueness to what we've had in the past, what we have now, and what we hope to have in the future.
Well, I just wonder if it is two separate definitions.
I think they probably are. I think they definitely are, as we've shown. But I think like I said, I think there's a place for both, and it's a policy consideration that we as a city are going to have to determine which is appropriate where.
Agreed.
Yeah, Chief, please come up. But right now, our tavern license allows someone to sell beer on draft or in the original containers for consumption on or off premises. Very simple, very broad. It would encompass both of those categories.
You're referring to Bonneville Brewery, if it fits. Under the proximity, outlet means a state store, a package agency, or a retail licensee. I don't know what's a retail anybody who applies for an alcohol license, is that a retail licensee?
Or does that mean you sell?
Does that include a grocery store? Well, it doesn't separate on premises sales or off premises. If you take the alcohol product off site to drink it, that would include a grocery store. In this code,
And a gas station.
And a gas station,
And a gas
convenience
station.
store.
So if one comes in by the high school, I'm reading this code going, well, wait a minute, they can't come in by the high school because it doesn't separate. But we called the Utah Department of Alcohol Beverage Services. They changed it from control to services recently. They said it doesn't matter for off-site.
So like a convenience store, a grocery
Premises.
store.
Well, it doesn't say that in the code, so I'm having an officer interpret this, and I feel comfortable. I've had an attorney call saying, why is the business I'm representing, why is it sitting on your desk? Why haven't you moved forward? And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable at this point referring to the state code. I want to refer to city code. We need to change it because it does refer to the state title right now.
So are you saying you want the city code to have some teeth too then? So you have some say there, or no?
I don't
No?
I don't know. I don't feel personally that the police needs to determine where we're selling alcohol. No.
Oh, okay, all right,
No, I don't take that as my job.
okay.
Do we know if other cities have a stipulation of how many in a specific area? And I'm sure it fluctuates so much though, right? Like you said, Park City may
Yeah,
have
like
way
every
more
restaurant sells alcohol there.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to, like, do you even need to, in my perfect world, I would just kind of pick the areas like Main Street, we're okay with that. And can we do that where we're selective on the areas without it being a specific zone?
Right, well, you raised the other question of, do we even want this restriction to be in the code anymore? It's there today, or do we just want to regulate it as a matter of land use? It's allowed in these zones, and not worry about having more than 2 on a block.
Because the state's regulating it, right?
Yes.
Like they have to get a license and,
Background checks.
We probably have an issue with some zones though, because you still have residential houses in zones. I don't know if that, I don't know, maybe not.
Mixed use.
It just seems like you don't want a bar next between 2 houses. I don't know.
Right. There's definitely a question, because everywhere you've got a zone, you have a boundary to that zone. And so you'll always have the opportunity to have, in effect, right next door, one of these businesses and then something different. So that's always a possibility. Our mixed-use zones really would be the only ones, and I would think that there's other things in place that might make it a little more tricky, but those would be the only zones, those 2 zones that could potentially have, a bar between 2 homes sort of thing.
Or below a home.
Or below, yeah, and frankly, in those scenarios, again, back to the Park City Main Street, you may want some residences
Right.
above, or even our own downtown, we may want residences above. So, yeah, the difficult part with, you asked if the state regulates them. They do. They don't regulate location though, other than through the proximity rule. So they won't look at it and say, this is off Main Street, so they don't want it there. It would be up to our ordinance to regulate whether or not a business type is appropriate. So yes, they do regulate at the state level, just not a density question, not a specific location question, other than through proximity.
So, Councilman Brady, I have not done that research about how other cities regulate these. Certainly we can, though, and we ought to look more closely at our land use tables to see if there are any restrictions there in terms of density or location.
I mean, I'm more leaning towards being less restrictive and not saying it has to be a linear, so many per linear or lineal, and just kind of leave it. Yeah, I'm learning so much tonight. But yeah,
math
I'm
lesson
leaning
too.
more towards just being less restrictive and then letting the state regulate it. And would that be, from the police side, is that anything wrong with that, being less restrictive? Like, do you see any concerns?
I don't see any concerns. I know the state, when they're aware of a problem, they want us to handle it before they handle it, of course. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but moral turpitude. If I stole gum 3 years ago, I don't know if that's a question for me to determine if you can sell alcohol.
Where the police would remain involved is through the criminal code. If someone's selling alcohol in violation of the terms of their state license, that's a crime. And the police team up with state people and local people all the time to see if they'll sell to underage buyers, and we prosecute that.
We did alcohol buys recently, and a local grocery store sold to one of our underage buyers, and we've cited the person who did it.
But the state code says what the citation is, correct? Or is it a city code that states
It's a
that?
state code violation.
You're just enforcing the law.
Now, the business license of this grocery store, does it need to be looked at? Does it need to be suspended, denied? Well, I'm good with the state regulating that.
And then it just is referred to the state then when that happens, when you cite them? Does the license go back to the state to be reviewed
Yes. the
because
state-
they broke the law?
The state has an administrative process to review those licenses and determine if they need to be revoked. And that's a separate civil administrative process that's separate from the criminal process. So, yeah.
Oh, one dumb question. Does beer and hard alcohol, is that separate? No, because at the, say at the brewery, can they serve?
Yeah.
The state
Regular
has
alcohol
their
there?
own regulations for them
And so
both,
that's
but we
separate?
don't, and
Okay.
we wouldn't in our business licensing. They would just get a business license from us,
Okay.
not an alcohol license. They'd get the alcohol license from the state and the business license from us.
And then they would get to serve whatever they have their license for
Correct.
through the Alcohol Services Board.
Correct.
They used to say they have to have a private club license or something for.
Yeah, but we did
But I
that
don't
for
know
a
if-
little
I don't know
while.
if that's the
I think we
case
got rid of
anymore.
that now.
Yeah, they got rid of it.
And it's a recommendation from
They
us,
did. The state
from the
did.
police department right
Does that
now.
affect
It's not
them
a
like the Moose or the
signed,
Elks
it's
or-
recommendation right now.
Yes and no, because they're fraternal orders, they're required to be
That was a question I just
separate.
thought of, because I'm thinking of Dave, but like the Eagles and the Elks and the Moose lodges, they're lodges and they serve alcohol. Does that affect, that's a different thing
They're
altogether.
private, right?
No, they're
But they
still
still-
covered by the state.
They still control, okay.
The state, and just like they do all the other
Okay.
establishments, the state, they come in and inspect. They make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Do you have any feedback or direction for us on the proximity issue for taverns? You want us to bring back more information, or do you know what you'd like?
I tend to
I-
lean towards
I
what
know-
I
Justin
lean
said,
to
so.
more leniency as well. I think we
Yeah.
have some places where I don't think it's a big,
Well, I know that Jared and the Downtown Alliance is working on
yeah.
doing some things, excuse me, downtown. I went to a festival in Ogden, and the entire street from the train depot all the way back, and it was amazing, the stuff that they had there. And they have a lot of bars on both sides of the street there, and it was packed. It was a lot of people. And talking to, excuse me, the economic development guy, I think I told you about him, his take on that was, during the day it's great, you got kids, you got everyone with entertainment and blah, 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 but after 5:30, 6 o'clock, when the children go, your event is going to end unless you have nightlife. And the nightlife was those taverns, and it was still a lot of people there at night. And his take was, if you have something for adults to do, they're going to do it. And it just makes it more fun for them. But it was interesting. So I think if we're trying to do something downtown, I'm not saying we need to have a 15, 20 more bars. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we probably should look at nightlife, some type of nightlife, because not everyone is married with, 5 or 6 kids, and they may want to step out and
Well,
have
and that
a
is
little
something
fun.
that people have brought up to me, that there's a lack of nightlife
Yeah.
in town, and I would agree.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, I think I sense that the council would like to allow the market and planning principles to contribute to how this plays out, rather than imposing arbitrary restrictions on it. So at this point, I think we would bring back something like this with the linear block, and you can tell us whether you approve it or not.
Sweet, I'm down.
All but the linear block.
If I can just quickly follow up on Councilman Hanson's question regarding the Elks and the Eagles, that actually falls under a different type of license. So there's what, 6, 7, 8 different classes of alcohol license through the state. We're talking about one specific one, it's a tavern license. This would fall under a different alcohol license class.
Okay, already. Had no idea, but yeah.
There's one other related policy issue that I want to bring up to you, and that's toward the very end of the packet, is that in our general business licensing code, we call out specialty licenses. And you have to get a specialty license if you operate a dance hall, if you operate an auction house, if you operate amusement devices, and our council has repealed some of those specialty licenses, but the language remains in this chapter of the Business License Code. But we still have a specialty license for itinerant merchants and solicitors. What we're proposing to you is that we simplify that a great deal, that we eliminate the specialty license concept altogether. Everyone doing business in Tooele needs a business license. Now, the different chapters of the code may add some requirements to what you need to do to get a business license, like if you're a door-to-door salesperson, or a pawnbroker, or an auctioneer. But our suggestion is that we simplify it and just have one kind of license. Maybe different application requirements, but just a business license. So that's our recommendation for you on that point.
Sweet.
Simple is always better.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thanks, guys.
I have dragged this out as long as I could for you. But do you have any other questions before we let you go on to the next thing? And
No, it was good discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
can we bring it back to you on the 15th for a vote, or would you like to have more discussion?
I'm good with the
I'm
vote.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can have it under business meeting.
See you in
There's
2
something to
weeks on
study
that.
before we do it, but yeah.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks.
Packet.
All right, we'll move on to our second discussion item, which is a payment of fee in lieu of water rights conveyance request for Microtel Moda Hotel, presented by Jared Stewart, Economic Development Director. That was a hard name to say.
Well, apparently this would be the first hotel of its type in the state of Utah. So that's one thing that I noted in their letter requesting. So just some things that I would highlight is that this is a hotel project that would be located just off of 2400 North on the east side of Main Street, kind of behind the North Point Medical offices. They're requesting 8 acre-feet of water. Their request, they wanted to note there's no sod grass. They're going to have water-saving and drought-tolerant plants and water-saving features, in their hotel rooms as well. One thing they noted and requested was that there was a hotel approved in September of 2022 at 1000 North and 200 West that was allowed to pay $15,000 per acre foot. And they have made the request to pay $15,000 for the 8 acre feet they're requesting. So I wanted to just give some context there. You might all remember this. There was that hotel requested their water fee in lieu payment actually it was September of 2021, and then they had studies and other things that had to happen, and their request wasn't approved until September of 2022, which was after your June 1st policy implementation that changed it from $15,000 to $35,000 per acre foot. Because they'd made their request prior to that policy, they were allowed to do the $15,000 fee in lieu payment. So that's kind of the context there, and you all probably remembered that anyways, but I just thought I'd put it out there and kind of explain that context for the record as you think about this. So that's their request, again, is for 8 acre feet of water at $15,000 per acre foot. They say they hope to create 5 to 15 new jobs. We all know hotels are great for sales tax. There would be a great revenue stream there. And our hotels are full now, a lot of times with contractors, people visiting Dugway, Tooele Army Depot, and hopefully more tourism as that grows in the valley too. This is I think hotels are good generally for the tax base. So questions, discussion, I'll turn it over to you, Council, for your thoughts.
This hotel, though, doesn't it have a long-term tenant option, or did I misread that somewhere? I thought I saw that on like a pre-development.
You know, yeah, they did come to pre-development, and I do not remember.
They didn't say that in pre-development.
I thought I read that somewhere,
One of
though,
them.
that they had like 15, I can't remember the number, but a certain amount of rooms that were set aside for longer stays or.
They didn't talk about that at pre-development.
Okay.
They
I
said
must
it
be
was an
thinking of something else.
94 rooms, 94. And it's a pretty hotel. I mean, it looks like it's going to be really nice, and they do have some great xeriscape plans around it, but our water costs $35,000, in my opinion.
I agree, yeah.
I'm for giving the 8 shares or the 8 acre feet just at the price we have.
At 35,000, yeah, me too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see any reason we'd give it for 15. If we do it for them,
Gotta
how
do
do
it
you
for the
not do it
rest.
for
Gotta do it
everyone
for
else,
everybody.
right? The price has been raised. They should pay that price.
You could not sell it for anything other than 35,000 unless you changed your policy in a public meeting. So to approve the request at 15 would violate your policy.
Right.
But I'm excited to have the structure. It's going to be nice.
Yeah, and the pre-development, you know, they had a PowerPoint presentation, which I'd be happy to forward to the whole council. They've said we could share that as well, and it looks great. You know, their plans look good, and I think it is an exciting thing for the city.
So when you said that this is the first type in Utah,
There's no
What's
other
different?
microtel
Oh, this
Moda
company.
hotel
Okay.
in the state of Utah. So
But it functions as a normal
yeah,
hotel.
same as any. Yeah, it's a hotel. Yeah, there's nothing I guess different about it from other hotels. But the first microtel Moda hotel in Utah.
And by all means, please explain to them, if you chat with them, the reasoning for the 35,000 instead of 15.
Absolutely.
But I'm in favor of selling the water.
Okay.
So I am too.
If that's the consensus, I'll prepare a resolution for council in a couple weeks, and we'll bring it back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
All right, item 6 is a closed meeting. We don't have a closed meeting tonight, so we will move on to item 7, which is to adjourn, and then we will reconvene for the RDA meeting to start at 7.